I'm kind of okay. I think we are live. Okay. It's always a shock to me when it actually works. Like I'm always blown away. Like, oh, technology worked. But of
Hey,
course,
yes,
but you are like me, where it's like you like technology. So, but you also know sometimes, whatever. But I do love it when a plan works. So, if you are seeing this in our Facebook group, my name is Jeanette, and I'm the community manager here for our Facebook group. And I just kind of popped in here today with my friend Carley Moore, Pastor Carley Moore over. He is a pastor in North Carolina, and I just invited him on today. We're going to be trying something new in 2022. That rhymes. Um,
awesome.
we're
New in
gonna be doing,
2022.
that's right. We're trying something new in 2022, and we are going to be bringing more pastors and ministry leaders that use technology right in here in the Facebook group with you guys, and just asking them to share their experiences. Hey, Victoria. Hey, Michael. Thank you for remembering to fill out the little eCam link thing to let so that I can see your name. Love that to pieces. Thank you. Carly, I don't know if you can see the comments, but if anybody asks us a question while we're in the middle of chatting, I will let you know.
Awesome.
Anyway, so Michael is already jumping to the first question, which is I was going to have you introduce yourself a little bit. So I said that you're a pastor in North Carolina. Will you introduce yourself to the rest of the group and let them know a little bit more about you and where you serve?
Absolutely. I'm Pastor Carley Moore. I pastor a small rural church in Eastern North Carolina, Vanceboro, North Carolina, not far from the coast, New Bern, North Carolina, Greenville, North Carolina. We're kind of around that area. We're like right in the middle of all these larger cities, towns, whatever. But we're like a one stop light kind of town and a caution light kind of deal. But yeah, so I'm the senior pastor at my church, Holly Hill Pentecostal Holiness Church. Been here for almost 3 years. April will make 3 years. So yeah.
I love that you are from a small and rural church, and partially because a lot of times, I work with people in this Facebook group. They message me, or just they put stuff in the Facebook group, or maybe they come to one of our live sessions and they're trying out text in church, and they're like, hey, we're a really small church. I mean, we don't know if we can use it. And so we're going to get into a little bit later how you and your church has been able to use text in church, even though you're small, even though you're rural, how you've been able to use it. And so we're going to dive into that a little bit deeper. But I just want you to do a little bit. I'm going to let you do all the talking. I love to talk, but I want people to hear from you today, and I want you to like paint a picture for us. Tell us like how you even heard about text in church. Paint us a picture.
Oh man. So I was actually on the way to a retreat at the Billy Graham Training Center in North Carolina, Greensboro, North Carolina area, and I had the Engage conference on my calendar, and I had a conflict, and I'm riding, I believe it was I-40, and I'm watching Engage, and they're talking about text in church. I had just started using another texting software, just simply because they gave out a bunch of free messages for COVID and all that. It was like right when COVID was really
Right.
kind of reaching
Mhm.
the peak, and so they're talking about text in church on Engage, and I'm like driving down I-40, and so I wait till there's like a break in cars. That way, if I do kind of drift a little bit, I'm okay. And I reached up to my phone and I screenshot, and I'm like, as soon as I get to the room, I got to fill this out because they were talking about the 60 days. And
Yes.
I tell you what, I did that. And I just kind of played around for the first 30 days. I set up a test bot account, and I just followed up with myself, which is probably weird to some people, but I was having the time of my life and working through these workflows and all. And then the second 30 days, I began introducing it to like our first time guests and doing kind of those workflows and prayer requests. So it was really thanks to Engage that I was able to get on board and did those 60 days, and I have not looked back since.
Yeah. So basically, what Carly is saying is shameless plug for the Engage conference because during Engage, we do give you a lot of tech advice. And Carly, you and I were chatting the other day. We both are really into tech. So we could get all into tech and how to use that for ministry, which maybe if we have time, we'll dive into a little bit of just tech in general. But I love that you said so the Engage conference does that. It goes into all types of technology and how to use different graphic design tools or websites, and then when we talk about texting as well. But I love that you got that 60-day free membership and then you played around with it for a little bit. And you said, maybe this is weird, but I have to tell you, I know from my perspective, that's what I did with my church too. Now, I didn't just follow up with myself. I did make all of our staff sign up for the follow-up. So for the first couple of weeks, they were our first time guests just to make sure that we knew what we were doing.
Yeah.
I think that's fairly common. People want to kind of test out the water a little bit. So I think that's relatable. I love the comments are, I say blowing up. I don't know how many people are actually on there, but we've got several people just saying that they're happy to hear from you and they think it's a great idea that you were testing on yourself. So I just want to shout you out for that. So
Awesome.
And someone even dropped the link for Engage. How helpful. Thanks, guys.
Look at that.
So now you got Text in Church, you used it on yourself, you kind of workshopped it a little bit, and then you started sharing it with your congregation. And Carly, you and I have had this conversation before. We've been pals for a while in the Facebook group. Know a little bit of this story, but I want you to talk about why was getting a texting platform so important? Like, what problem were you having where you were kind of seeking out a way to communicate via text to your congregation?
The only way I know how to say it is that I sucked at follow-up. I was failing miserably. I was forgetting prayer requests. I was forgetting to follow up with people who had given their heart to the Lord. I was trying my hardest, but I'm the only staff member at my church. Me and my wife really kind of head up all of the ministries here, which thankfully we're developing leaders and getting some new people plugged in, and that's God's just doing a great thing. But man, I was awful at following up, and so when they were talking about the easy buttons, oh my goodness, the easy buttons are the best thing ever. And so I'm driving down I-40 and I'm like, man, I hope that these easy buttons are still accessible when I get to where I'm going. And sure enough, they were the workbooks with the easy buttons. But the follow-ups, the workflows that they were talking about with the Engage conference, shameless plug again. But when I was able to hit those easy buttons and just look at the workflows and make it my own, that was a huge thing. One of my favorite things is, yes, you can incorporate the automated things in the text in church, but the reminders, hey, don't forget to call this person. And then, a week or so later, hey, maybe shoot this person a text or an email. And then you can build in some automated things in there. But man, it just took my follow-up. It took that burden of, God, I'm not doing enough for the people you've entrusted me with, and so it's kind of lifted that burden off of me, and now I feel like I actually do an okay job at follow-up thanks to Text in Church.
So I do want to hop in here. I've seen some comments. Robert, you're saying, where do I get an easy button? So first of all, easy buttons are something that comes in the workbook for the Engage conference. So Robert, I hope you've gotten your free ticket to Engage, because as people are sharing their strategies at the Engage conference, there'll be some opportunities for you to get an easy button that helps you use that strategy inside Text in Church. But don't worry, even if you're like, but I want an easy button right now. We have our Text in Church Academy that has a workbook in it that also gives you easy buttons. And of course, for all of you who are already Text in Church members, you have an easy button built in, and it's called our member experience team, because they are here to help make things easy for you, and they will help you find like the workflow and things like that you're looking for. So those are some ways to get closer to that easy button. Okay, so one of the things that you mentioned was, you talked about the workflows and how you liked that, but you also liked the personal connections that you were able to make. Is there a moment or a period in time where you realized that Text and Church was working to solve a specific problem for you, through one of those ways that you were using it?
Yeah, absolutely. It was honestly, it was when that first prayer request came through, and I have a whole workflow of several different steps, and just to kind of highlight like day one when a prayer request comes through, before somebody even completes the connect card link, I get a message, hey, this person texted, pray to your number, you might want to follow up with them. So even before I know what the prayer request is, I can already just be calling that person by name. And instantly, once they fill out that connect card, and even if they don't, I have a lady that writes cards for my church.
We do too.
She gets their phone number. If they have completed the connect card, she gets what the specific prayer request is. My secretary here at the church, treasurer here at the church, she instantly gets a message, and then I try to even incorporate my social media team onto it, where they get a message. Hey,
Yes.
if you know this person, reach out and say, hey, look, we're praying for you. Is there anything we can do for you? That kind of deal. And so that the first time that prayer request came through, it was one of those moments where I was in a busy season, and in it I have some automated things
Right.
that just it kind of helps us stay reminded. And so we're like a week into this person who had just had a surgery, and I get that reminder, and I'm like, oh, I forgot to follow up with them. And
Yes.
so I call them. But what I had also forgot is I had in the workflow a message built in to go to them.
Hmm.
And when I called them, they were like, hey, I got your message. I'm sorry I didn't respond. And in my mind, I'm like, what message? Because it was the first time using any
Yeah.
workflows or anything. And so I went back and looked, and I was like, oh, that's right. I
Right.
had I had it worked in, but I was able to talk with them, and then I think on my prayer request I have like 21 days. Now they're not messaged or contacted all
Right.
21 days, but within a 21-day period,
Right.
I have workflows set up so that they're being loved on by me, by other people in the church,
Hmm.
and they're receiving emails and texts and encouragement. But yeah, that was the first prayer request that came through, and I just was like, "Holy moly, this thing is getting ready to change my life."
Yeah, so I love that. And I love that you're talking about follow up, because at Texan Church, we talk a lot about follow up, but we're always talking about first time guest follow up typically. But I love how you're talking about using follow up as, like prayer follow up, and how, yeah, you're not messaging someone for 21 days straight necessarily, but you are reaching back out and keeping that touch point open, which I just think is beautiful, and a strategy that perhaps more of us could incorporate. So you've got Texan Church. It's working for your ministry. It's working to help you stay on top of what you said you weren't so great at, and and it's helping you. So now that how is your daily life as a pastor, the only staff member, like you said, how is it different now that your problem of not remembering to follow up and not keeping up with that follow up? How are things now that you do have that problem solved?
Well, thanks to Engage, I hired a virtual assistant for like $47 a month. You can't hire anybody for that.
Right.
So, there's a lot of perks with it, but it has really and truly, when I talk to people about text in church, I tell them that it's basically my virtual assistant, and she doesn't forget anything. So it's been great. It's really, like I said earlier, it's lifted a burden off of me
Yeah.
where I felt like I was failing as a pastor.
Hmm.
I could preach every Sunday, but I was failing with that pastoral role and caring for the flock, caring for the sheep kind of deal. And so it's really helped me with that. And those reminders that you can set up in workflows and all. And I even have on my calendar, hey, set up weekly text in church, or hey,
Hmm.
check text in church, and that's on my calendar like an
Yeah.
appointment. And so I make sure that I'm constantly following up, because sometimes somebody might join a workflow for the second time, and
Right.
everything not function right, but then I can go in and I can fix that. So
Right.
I have that set up for me to automatically check it each week. It's a part. It's almost like a staff meeting with
I was going to
text.
say, just like you would have a staff meeting just to make sure everybody is on the same page, right?
Yep.
That is awesome, and I love how you talk about that burden that you carried, and so many pastors carry. That there's so much to do, we can never get it all done, and that your ability to use text in church to kind of just help you with a little bit more organization, those reminder steps. Which, yeah, we talk about the text and emails that automatically go out to the guest or to the person that's texted in the prayer request, but what about those reminders to you? And what I like is that you're still very involved in the follow up. This is not something you've handed over to your virtual assistant text in church. You're allowing that system to help you continue with that personal follow up. And so I think that's very, very encouraging. And because a lot of times we get the question like, well, we don't, automated workflow, that sounds kind of like a robot or something. And it's like, no, this is not taking anything away from you. This is equipping you better to serve. So thank you for sharing that. Now, I did, when we were talking beforehand, I did ask you, are you the only person that uses your text in church account? Or, so if you have another person on your team that uses it besides you, which I know you said you're the only staff member, but we know you have volunteers, or if you had a story you wanted to share with us just about another way that you might use text in church besides just that first time yes follow up or that prayer follow up.
Yeah. So one of my favorite things about text in church is that you can have multiple numbers, and so. It hadn't been too long after we were with text in church, and I was really kind of using it and introducing it to our congregation. Um, I have an outreach director here who is doing an amazing job. And so I set her up a number so that she didn't have to always give out her personal number.
Yes.
I just want to caution you in ministry. Be careful giving out your personal information. And that's where text in church is a lifesaver. The fact that people can call the number and it can ring to your phone. And so I just encouraged her because she was giving these random people her number and she'd get random calls all the time. And I was like, hey, look, um, give them this number, and at least like for us, I have it where it shows Holly Hill Church when they
Yeah.
call. And so I said, at least you'll know when it says Holly Hill Church that it's somebody calling from our outreach or
Right.
from the Vanceboro Christian Help Center. And so I had a number set up for her. She uses it. My wife uses it as well for some things. But one of the best. Uh, anytime you and I talk, I bring this story up. Anytime
Yeah.
I talk with
I remember when you posted
anybody
on
about
Facebook
text and
that
church,
day.
yeah, I bring this story up, and it literally almost made me cry. I'll never forget. It was like an SOS going out. My outreach director, Christy, she sends me a text. She was like, we needed all these cans and all to fill our food pantry at the church. It was something new we were kicking off, just trying to really help the community. We're getting ready to put up a bunch of blessing boxes. And she just put out one day that we needed some cans, some canned foods and things. And there was a food pantry not far from us that had to move some items really fast. They just
Mhm.
had an influx. During COVID with some additional government assistance, they weren't moving product like they had been, and they had I want to say it was probably about 2 truckloads. And so Christy sends me a message. It's early that morning, and she's like, "Hey, I really need you to see if you can get some people to let's come to the church and unload all these canned goods." And so I was like, hey, text in church, the new outreach number. I can send a message like I'm Christy. And so she's got her hands full bringing the trucks back. And so I hop on text in church and I send a message to about 12 people. And I just was like, hey, this is Christy. This is our outreach number if you didn't already have it saved. Can you meet us at our outreach house and help us unload a bunch of canned goods? I was texting that as I'm walking out the house, pouring down rain, kind of
Mhm.
cold too. And I live about 5 minutes from the church. As I'm pulling up at our outreach house, there's like 10 cars, and there's probably about 15 people, and half the
Wow.
truck, half the canned goods are already out. And it was simply because I was able to send out that message, a personal message to all those people, and we had it unloaded. Not only did we have it unloaded, but several of them stuck around and organized it following that. So, man, Texan Church was a lifesaver that day. We had people out in the pouring rain unloading canned goods at the last minute because Texan Church came through in the clutch and helped me get the word out.
Well, I just, like you said, I've heard that story before. I saw it on Facebook. We've talked about it. I never get tired of hearing that story because it's an example, of course, of how, the Texan Church platform worked for you, but more importantly, your church community, your church family worked for you. And then, of course, you and I both North Carolina people. I love that small town. They don't have very far to drive to get there.
Yeah.
And they got there to help out. I love that so much. And thanks for mentioning that thing, because we did have somebody comment, like, how do we get the number to show up as our church? But basically what you need to do when you're texting out for the first time using your number, your text and church number, is you need to say, hey, this is Holly Hill Church, or this is Holly Hill Outreach. Save this number in your phone, and then once they do that, then every time you text from that number, it'll show up right. Just like if your friend texted you the first time, they text, they have to tell you who they are until you save their save their name. I sometimes don't remember to do that right away, and then I have to scroll through and see, like, where did this conversation start? But yeah, just like you would with a friend, you just have to tell them who you are and then ask them to save your number.
Yeah, and repeat it often.
Yeah.
Like, I probably, if I talk in my sleep, I'm probably saying our text and church number in my sleep. You just repeat it for everything. Just repeat it, repeat it. I know my church probably, they're sick of me saying the number. But now, instead of people texting my personal number, I
Right.
text people more off of that number than I do. And I tell them I treat it just like my personal phone number. You text, I'm going to respond. And it's so much better than iMessage, because if I open it, it still says unread until
Right.
I either reply or I check that it's been read. And I love it. That's a game changer too.
Yeah, and why is that so helpful to you? Can you kind of break that down? Because sometimes we get a few questions about that. So when you read a regular text message, once you open it and read it, it marks as unread. I mean, it marks as read unless you do something funky with your phone, right? But
Right.
in text and church, that is we don't have read and unread. We have, it's in that inbox until you move it out of that inbox,
Yeah.
and it's going to have that little dot by it until you have performed an action on it. So can you talk a little bit more about why that's so important to you?
Yeah.
Why that helps you?
Yeah. So I love technology. I have an Apple Watch. There it is. This camera's messing with me. Yeah. So, it's real easy. You get a message, you read it. Well, you read it on your watch, and now it's read on your phone as well. And you're like, well, I'll respond as soon as I get where I'm going. And as soon as you get where you're going, you're distracted by something else. With text and church, you read it, it's still there.
Yeah.
It still shows up as a notification. In fact, I set mine up on my phone, where on iPhone, you know how like you can make it where it's a little banner and
Yeah.
then it disappears? I make mine stay there.
Yes.
And so I have to physically make mine disappear, just to help me. But then when I click on the text and church app, boom, there it is. It still shows that I have an unread message. And until I physically go in and change it, or I go in and I perform an action on it, it's there. And so I don't forget now.
Right. So it's designed to help you decide, do I need to do anything with this or not? Another thing I really like about that feature inside the platform is, let's say it's you and Christy basically using the account. So it's not that many people. But, say you have multiple users using it for different ministries. Well, if you only have one phone number, those messages are going to come into that inbox. So maybe you see the message, maybe you do look at it, but it's not your ministry. Well, in a regular situation, then that would be marked as read, and then nobody else would maybe see it. Now with text and church, it stays there until the person who needs to take action on it can take action on it. Or maybe you are the person for the day and you are the one that's supposed to take action, but it is there. And that is why we have that. So I'm glad that you talked a little bit about that and how it actually, again, like you mentioned at the beginning, you forget it's in there. You have the best intentions. You forget. You're multitasking, just like so many pastors. But this kind of helps you stay on task and be reminded, even if you forget right when you get to that place, like, oh, I want to respond to this when I get to the next place. You forget, but then 30 minutes later, an hour later, it's still there to remind you. So the reminder hasn't gone away. That's my biggest thing with some of the reminders on, like, in my computer and stuff.
Yeah.
It once it reminds me, it goes away, and I'm like, no, I haven't done that yet. I haven't. You need to still remind me.
Yeah, yeah. And it's great for me because my wife, she's a school teacher, but she does a lot. Like, we're in ministry together.
Yeah.
We both pastor this church. And so a lot of times she'll get home and she'll say, "Hey, did you see the message from so and so on Texan Church?" "Yes, I did, but I didn't respond." "Well, okay, well, you might want to respond." And that helps as well because she can read the message, but it's still, there's
Right.
been no action performed on it, like you said, and so then it's still there waiting on me to do something.
Yeah, so he has that bonus Hannah feature in his account
Yeah,
to double remind him.
yeah,
Tell her we appreciate that very much. Well, Carley, I am so thankful that you joined me for the first edition of whatever we end up calling this. I just love hearing you share your stories. I love your enthusiasm for ministry and for making those connections and building the kingdom of God in your area. And of course, I love that you are a raving fan of Texan Church and Engage Conference as well. As always, it is a pleasure chatting with you. Is there anything else you want to say to our peeps before we sign out for today?
yes. And this is something that I tell every church that I help with. Texan Church, don't use it as like a blast message deal. I understand sometimes we need to, but every message you send, try to put a question in it.
Mm,
Try to ask them something that sparks them to respond back, because then it's become personal. Then you've taken it to a whole nother level. And I think I saw somebody put in the chat a few minutes ago that they'll see it from a strange number, or they'll see the number and they're like, "Oh, it's just the church again." But
mm,
if you make it personal on almost all, you can't always do it, but
mm.
on almost all of your messages, if you make it personal, ask them a question, ask how to do and how can you pray for them, you're going to get a response and you're going to make it more personable. And there's, like, when I say from the pulpit here, "Hey, text me on this number," I treat it like my personal number. I see people out in the congregation, they're like, "Yes, he does. He text him. He does. He will respond." And some of them, like, I'll say, "Call it," and they're like, "Yes, call it. He will answer." And so make it personable. Like, give a question, give them something to respond to. Don't just hit them with a whole bunch of info, but make it a connection. That's the heart behind Texan Church. Know, notice, and love. And if you're just constantly making it a one-way means of communication, then that's not why Texan Church was developed. And so, make it a two-way street where they can interact with you.
Yeah, we love those conversations getting started, those prayers getting prayed over, and prayers getting answered. We love hearing those stories. And so thank you so much, Carley, for joining me today. Thank all of you who happen to be
Yeah.
here live. And of course, if you're seeing this later and have any questions for Carley or you can tag us in the comments and we will help you get to your answers that you need. Thank you so much. Thank you, Carley.
Oh yeah.
Bye. Okay.